Calling the regular monthly meeting of the Parks and Recreation Commission to order for Wednesday, May 25th, 2016. And if you'd all rise for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. Ms. Blackman, would you call roll, please?
Chair Wiscombe?
Here.
Vice Chair Rincon-Ibarra? He's absent. Commissioner Longstreet?
Here.
Commissioner Clark?
Here.
Commissioner Heaton?
Here.
Commissioner Cavazos?
Here.
Thank you very much. Okay, Ms. Zachary, any changes to the agenda or written communications?
No.
Okay. Seeing as there are none, we're going to move on to general public comment. Any member of the public may address the commission for up to 2 minutes on any subject within the jurisdiction of the commission that is not scheduled for public discussion before the commission. We have several speakers. One is Mr. Gene Tyburn, and two are yielding their time. Is Pete Dalbello here? Okay. And Fernando Medina? Okay, fine. So, Mr. Tyburn, if you come up, please. You have a total of 6 minutes.
You've already called the cops, Leslie. All right. I want to show you. Did any of you people that I addressed before ever go down and look at that tree? Please put your hand up if you went and looked at the tree. None of you looked at the tree. Wonderful. I thought you wouldn't. This is a tree on Pedregosa Street that's just been pruned, but the gentleman who pruned the tree was afraid to prune it any harder because Mr. Downey would give them a citation. This is not fair to the public to have them keep pruning their tree every 6 months. You should know that. Why don't you know that? Why didn't you go down and look at my complaint and see that it was justified? I would like to take that tree and take it down to a nice, beautiful tree shaped where the white line goes around the tree so the gentleman wouldn't have to prune the tree every 6 months. Those lines represent the electrical wires going through the tree. Yet you people who are on this commission, who want to be good people and do the right thing by our city, couldn't take 5 minutes to walk by or drive by and see how that tree was. Now, I really don't give a damn about the tree, because the more I prune it, the more money I make. But I wanted to do the right thing for the public. And this is what is endemic with the tree department run by Jill Zachary and Mr. Escobar and Tim Downey. They don't give a damn about the public. And you're supposed to help the public and defend the public, and you're not doing a thing about it. You're like a mafia that agrees with them on every subject. Shall I say it again? You agree with them on everything. I can see how inroads I'm making with you people. You're sitting there like stuffed animals. So here is the tree that I suggested pruning.
Mr. Tyburn, could you please go to the podium, please, and talk into the microphone so everyone can hear you that's listening, please? Thank you.
Will you put the next photograph up? No, the next photograph. The reason I can't prune the tree that way, Mr. Downey, it's bad for the tree. It's harmful to the tree. It shouldn't be pruned that tree that way. We don't want trees pruned that way. It's very bad. Here's how Mr. Downey prunes the trees on the city. This is a city tree, not on public property, private property, but a city tree that he sanctioned to be pruned that way. Now, what's going on here? Are you supposed to deal with Jill? Are you supposed to see that the public gets some address by being treated fairly if they want to prune their trees in a proper way? Why don't you do something about it instead of sitting there? I can't get one emotion out of you. I can't get one hand raised by you. Unbelievable. Okay. You know all the trees on Anapamu that are dying? Those iconic trees, they're all dying because Mr. Downey neglected to take care of them. He could have deep watered them a year ago. But since they're all dying, he's decided, well, hey, maybe I should deep water the trees. So now he's finally deep watering the trees. I stopped by the gentleman who was doing the deep watering, and I said, why haven't you done this before? They wouldn't be dying if you had maybe pruned them a little bit and deep watered them a little bit. He says, if I say anything to Mr. Downey, I'll get fired. So you got all those iconic trees on Anapamoo dying. Now let's take milpas. Those trees have all been root pruned. They are gigantic. 5 minutes of rain, they double their weight in 5 minutes of rain. If we had an event, they'd fall over. But Mr. Downey doesn't do anything about that. So he lets them split in two. And last year we had another one split in two. Now, the reason I have this ongoing argument with Mr. Downey is I had predicted 2 trees on State Street that would fall over. Mr. Downey took no note of them. I even went to Mayor Bloom and told her those trees were going to fall over. Any idiot could see they would fall over. Mr. Downey took no action. And guess what, folks? They fell over. They fell over on the gas station, costing the city $20,000 to repair the gas station canopy. I see no emotion here at all. You're like statues. Okay. Well, I'm trying to enlighten you that the public should be treated and protected from a mafia-type organization that writes rules and adjusts them how they want to be adjusted instead of being fair to the public. And I see I've made no inroads with you at all. Okay, well, I have already this week taken 100 photographs of dead and dying trees on our city streets. I have a collection. 100 dead and dying and diseased trees that I collect. Just this week, I have one more week to go to get more photographs. And I'm opening a site called Terrible Tree Work by the City of Santa Barbara. And it's going to be with your names on it. I'll assign you a tree, and you can look at it. And I'm going to send it to all the municipalities in Southern California.
Would you wind up, please, Mr. Tyburn?
Yes, I will. Thank you. And I'm going to send it to all the municipalities in California, so they're going to see how well the Tree City, Santa Barbara, is taking care.
Okay, your time is up, Mr. Tyburn. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you for your stoic behavior.
Okay, we have one more speaker, and that's Ms. Debbie Armstrong. Welcome, Ms. Armstrong. You have 2 minutes.
Hey. Hello. I'm here to talk about access to Hale Park. I've lived on Eucalyptus Hill in that area on La Vista Grande for 30 years, and I've walked Hale Park as part of a 3-mile loop that many of us do. The park is accessed on 2 sides. The Camino Viejo has about 4 parking spaces, and the Alston side has a stone bridge, and it used to have a ladder for maybe 20 years, and then that was replaced by steps, and now they're gone. And so the ladder was removed, steps were put, then the steps have been removed, I think about January of this year. So that means that we can't walk a loop anymore. You can still access the park from the Camino Viejo side, but you can just use the park, maybe dog walkers and things, and then leave, but you can't do a loop. And that really cuts into, many of us that like to walk. The Eucalyptus Hill Improvement Association had some comments at last Sunday's meeting, or the Sunday before maybe, about the fact that that perhaps it was taken down because of safety issues. I thought if there could be railing, possibly, a rail. No, I never saw anyone have trouble, though, accessing. I'm 66. I don't have trouble. People older than me walked. Young kids, went down the stairs. Dogs, small dogs, big dogs. It just really opened it up for great access. So I hope that we can come to some, decision soon about getting access to the park from that side again. All right? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Appreciate your coming. Okay, that closes public comment, and we're going to move on. I understand that we have a youth council report. Yes. You, Camille? You're, Ari Chittick. Yes, welcome. Why don't you come on up here, and we're anxious to hear your report. Thank you for coming.
Okay, yeah, no problem. So this year's school year is like winding down, and so we're unfortunately losing 3 seniors, including our chair. And we recently conducted interviews for new members on May 16th and May 19th. So we did have a small pool of applicants, so we might request to have a special recruitment in order to fill all the vacancies. But those that did interview seemed like good candidates. And last week, at our last meeting, we evaluated ourselves to see where we could improve upon our successes and get more teens involved. But some of our successes this year was a conversation with parents on cyberbullying. So we kind of educated parents about different social media sites and the difficulties of cyberbullying. And we also took our anti-bullying message to the annual Teen Summit down in Southgate. And there were about 200 teens there, and so it was really well received. We've also begun planning our first big event, which will be on October 8th. It is our annual Teen Leadership Conference, and this year, instead of just inviting local teen leaders and ASB officers, we're hoping to invite youth councils and leadership groups from different areas. Our last official meeting for this year will be on June 6th, and afterwards we're having our end of the year dinner, and you guys can come if you want. So thank you for your support.
Thank you very much, Ms. Chittick. Yes, Ms. Longstreet?
Thank you for the report. And would you take a message back to Youth Council for us that we miss our youth intern
Oh yeah, that's
on the committee, and we would really love to have someone
We're
next
actually
year.
working on that.
Oh,
we'll
excellent.
Hope that next year, beginning in July, we'll have a youth intern. So we're looking for one. Yeah.
That's great.
We
Yeah,
miss them.
we sure do. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Anyone else? Yeah. Thank you so much, Ms. Chittick. Appreciate it. Okay, we're going to move on to Commissioner Committee Assignment Reports, and we'll just go down the line. Ms. Clark?
On Wednesday, May 18th, I attended the Parks and Recreation Community Foundation regular board meeting, and there we reviewed monthly financials and we discussed our Magic on the Urban Wine Trail fundraiser, in which we raised over $24,000 for our kids' camp scholarships to Parks and Rec summer camps and for our Youth at Risk culinary arts program. And last week on Wednesday, I attended the commission site visit to Elings Park regarding the proposed renovations to the Elings tennis facility, which we'll talk about more later.
Thank you. Ms. Longstreet?
I attended the Neighborhood Advisory Council meeting last month, and we had a very good meeting where Council Member Dominguez and Murillo came and gave us their views on their districts and their goals for the future for their term. And there was a lively discussion about medical marijuana on Milpas Street and some of the other concerns that are happening in the neighborhood. So we had a good, engaged public comment session. So,
Great. Thank you. Mr. Cavazos, do you have any?
I'll just ditto what Ms. Clark mentioned. The
Okay.
Park Foundation meeting and the site visit at Elings.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Heaton?
I was at the site visit as well.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple things here. I attended the Street Tree Advisory Committee meeting on May 5th, and Mr. Downey reported on the violations. We have 2 new cases. One case has been closed, one is on hold for maintenance, and 2 additional cases are closing soon. So that's pretty good news. And we made site visits to the trees on your agenda. Attended the Golf Advisory Committee meeting on May 11th. Rounds and revenues for April 2016 were lower by about 13% than budgeted, and lower by about 8% from April 2015. They were the decreases in rounds and revenues were primarily due to impacts from rains, and as you probably all remember, the very heavy winds that we had. No golfers like to hit balls in the wind. They go everywhere. The Players Improvement Fund Tee and Bunker project was completed and opened on April 20th, and there's been many positive responses from golfers regarding that program. And reward card sales in April were 20. They sold 20 rewards cards, and that's up 5 from April 2015. So the rewards card sales are doing well. On Monday the 16th, I attended the special city council meeting and where the Parks and Recreation Department budget was reviewed by council members. And I spoke on behalf of the commission for recommendations that we made at our meeting last month for the FY 2017 budget. And I just echo what Ms. Clark said. I attended the Park Foundation regular meeting on Wednesday, the 18th. Yes.
Madam Chair. I also I should mention, I went to the Finance Committee meeting yesterday. I did not speak totally for the commission because we had not discussed it, but I have been following, and as it is easy to do online these days, all of the budget hearings. And many of our capital projects are at risk for this cycle. And I spoke to the fact that we are part of the infrastructure too, and that anything we put off in our area, it still needs to be done. It adds to the total problem of the city, and that I would hope that the council would review the issues as citywide. And even though I know we are in a crisis with our roads, but we are also in a crisis with our police station. We're in a crisis in many areas, and we need to be looking at it in total.
Thank you. Very well put. I'm glad you went to that meeting. Just as a follow-up on that, the budget meeting is going to be on June 1st. Is that correct, Ms. Zachary?
Chair Wiscombe and members of the commission, the council will have a budget work session in this chamber from 4 to 7 p.m. on June 1st, Wednesday, June 1st.
So, yeah, I would encourage, I will not be able to attend, but I would encourage any commissioners to go and speak on behalf of what we've discussed for the FY 2017 budget recommendations. I think the more people, the better result we might have. So, okay, thank you. Okay, commission and staff communications, anything, nothing there. Okay, so we're going to move on to agenda item number 1, which is the consent calendar and recommendation that the commission waive the reading and approve the minutes of the regular meeting of April 27th, 2016. So, does anyone have any?
So moved.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Oh, you can vote. Mm-hmm. Okay, all in favor? Aye. Okay, that carries unanimously. Thank you. We are moving on to agenda item number 2, which is Street Tree Advisory Committee items. Any action of the Parks and Recreation Commission made pursuant to the Municipal Code Chapter 15.20, tree planting and maintenance, or 15.24, preservation of trees, may be appealed to the City Council within 10 days pursuant to provisions of Section 1.30.050 of the Municipal Code. Thank you. So the first item is item 2A1, which is 2023 Edgewater Way. And we have Mr. Escobar here, since Mr. Downey's absent. Welcome,
good afternoon,
Mr. Escobar.
Chair Wiscombe Commissioners. This afternoon I'm pitch hitting for Mr. Tim Downey, our Urban Forest Superintendent. I am the Parks Manager. So let's get started. 2023 Edgewater Way, the applicant is requesting the removal of one Ficus benjamina and a group of other ficus major minor trees. The applicant intends to evaluate the property and determine if pruning or additional removals are needed to open up the visibility of his property. The committee inspected the trees and determined that the overlapping canopies of the trees would benefit from the removal of this one tree. The committee recommends the removal of this one tree on the application.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Escobar. We don't have any speakers on this, so I'll just open it up to the commission for discussion, questions, and a possible motion. Anyone have any questions? Anyone like to make a motion? Yes, Mr. Heaton.
I'd move that we approve the setback tree removal of the Ficus benjamina at 2023 Edgewater Way.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 2B1, which is the 00 block of Chase Drive. Mr. Escobar?
At the 00 block of Chase Drive, as you recall, at our last meeting, April 27, 2016, the commission denied the request to remove 2 Pyrus kamakawi trees at 48 Chase Drive. The applicant is interested in promoting native tree species. Even though this request was denied, the committee determined that co-designating another tree species and planting in between the existing trees would be a benefit for the street. The committee recommended that the commission co-designate Prunus ilicifolia, or also commonly known as hollyleaf cherry, for the 00 block of Chase Drive.
Okay, we have no public comment on this, so I'll open it up to the commission. Thank you, Mr. Escobar. Yes, Ms. Longstreet.
I would just like to say I'm really happy to see this back in such a timely fashion. I think the neighborhood was really out for an improvement, and I think the tree removal would have made that area barren, and I'm so happy to see this new designation come before us.
Would you like to make a motion?
So I move that we accept the changes to the street tree master plan to designate the hollyleaf cherry for the 00 block of Trace Drive.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay, that carries unanimously. Thank you. And we'll move on to item 2B2, which is the 400 block of Calle Puerto Vallarta for designation. Mr. Escobar?
Chair Wisdom, Commissioners, the 400 block of Calle Puerto Vallarta is currently planted with Chinese elms and Chinese flame trees. This section of Calle Puerto Vallarta currently does not have a tree designated. As part of a sidewalk infill project along Lower Milpas Street, the Public Works Department will be creating space to plant new trees along Calle Puerto Vallarta. The committee recommends that the commission approve the designation of Erebotria deflexa, otherwise known as bronze loquat, for the 400 block of Calle Puerto Vallarta.
Thank you. For the east side of Calle Puerto Vallarta.
That's correct.
Yes. Okay.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you very much. Okay. So back to the commission for discussion and or a motion. Yes.
Is
Mr.
it
Cavazos?
native tree, drought-tolerant tree that we're
This tree is not a native, but it is very drought tolerant. It has a vast shape to it, so its growth habit is very similar to the Chinese flame tree and also the elm tree. So it would be real characteristic to be planted in this area. And the tree itself, the trunk itself, doesn't get as big as the other trees do, so it'll fit just nicely in the spot.
Perfect. Thank you.
Anyone else? Would anyone like to make a motion? Ms. Longstreet?
I move that we accept the changes to the street tree master plan in the 400 block of Calle Puerto Vallarta to designate the copper tone or bronze loquat tree.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Okay, that carries unanimously. Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Escobar, for that,
Thank you.
for filling in. You did a fine job. Yeah. Okay. We're going to move on to new business. Agenda item number 3, which is the Upper Aurora Borough restoration at Barger Canyon. And Ms. Zachary, did you have?
Just a few, Chair Wiscombe, just a few introductory remarks. We have Erin Markey here making the presentation. It's her first time before the commission. She's a new addition to our Creeks Division staff. She's a Creeks planner. And this is a project that you've heard about mostly in budget presentations and when the department, the Creeks Division, moved forward with acquiring this property. It's a unique location. It's an opportunity to address some fairly significant creek issues and improvements, as well as ways to address water quality and improve the overall habitat of the upper watershed. It's moving forward with construction, and I thought this would be a great time to give you a status report on the design and the purpose of the project. So with that, I will turn it over to Erin.
Great, thank you for having me. So yes, I'm here today to talk to you about the Upper Arroyo Borough Restoration Project located in Barger Canyon, which the Creeks Division has been working on. The project site is in the upper portion of the Arroyo Borough watershed, up here in an area that
Ms. Markey, could you just pull the mic a little closer?
Sorry about that.
Yes, thank you.
Better. In an area that was previously noted as having active bank erosion and instability, and therefore was a target for future restoration activities. The Creeks Division, as was just said, purchased the parcel on which the project will be taking place back in 2013. So here's a closer view. It's just over 14 acres. The city-owned parcel is shown here in red, spanning both banks of Arroyo Borough Creek. And at the time that the acquisition of this parcel was negotiated, a conservation easement was also negotiated over the creekside portion of the neighboring property shown here in green. So an additional acre, roughly, of habitat along the creek is now preserved into the future, as well as allows for our restoration project to take place within that area of the creek. So this is a recent aerial photo taken last year of the property. It's kind of a hourglass-shaped parcel, and some of the existing conditions on site that the project is looking to remediate. And I'm going to take you through just a few historic images to show how some of these existing unnatural and undesirable conditions came to be over time. So starting with our oldest historic image we could find was from 1928. You can see the creek winding its way down through here. You notice there are far more trees in this image than were in the previous. And moving on to 1954, we're starting to see development encroaching. We have Barger Canyon Road as well as Foothill Road in their roughly current configurations. The loss of a number of upland oak woodland trees as well as riparian trees along the creek corridor. And I also wanted to point out that at this point in time, the lower portion of the creek channel still maintains some of this natural sinuosity or meander, which you'll see in the next photo from 1968 is no longer present. So at this point, we see our largest change in land use as the property was converted to an orchard. This lower portion of the creek channel was straightened at some point prior to this. In addition, a number of riparian trees, pretty much the whole creek channel, if you zoom in on it, has no tall statured vegetation at this time, just low-growing vegetation. So all riparian vegetation was cleared, which likely led to a number of the erosion and channel incision issues that we see on site now. Additionally, at this time, 7 different bridges were installed. I just circled each of those. 7 different bridges were installed on the property across the creek with concrete abutments in some cases, sometimes just wood abutments. In addition, a small house located just right here on the east bank appears, as well as a road that spans the whole property along the east bank of the creek. And so we assume that a number of the unnatural bank hardening features that we see on site today, including concreted banks, revetment, concrete riprap, were likely installed around this era in order to protect the development associated with these bridges and those homes, when in reality, those bank hardening features ended up probably leading to increased erosion in other locations downstream. So moving on, so the property remained an orchard until 2006, when the previous property owner removed all of the orchard trees as well as cleared a large amount of the riparian vegetation again. This photo is from 2008, and you can see we're just starting to get the recovery of some riparian vegetation in this upper portion of the watershed. And this home was still present in 2008, but the next year the Jesucita fire came through this area of Santa Barbara and actually burned its way down this canyon. It didn't burn many of these homes, but it burned down the canyon and completely burned this home. So that home is actually no longer there. So the overall goals of the project are to improve watershed health through the restoration of this portion of the creek, as well as to provide watershed protection into the future. Some of the specific goals that we'll be working to do would be to increase the riparian zone, as well as increase the diversity of native riparian species on site, especially in this lower portion of the creek where we really lack any true riparian zone. We'll be laying back creek banks that are already eroding in order to lay them back to a more stable slope and revegetate them with native plants. We'll be removing all of those unnatural, artificial hardening features that I described within the creek channel, a number of bridges and concrete banks. And in this lower portion of the creek channel, we'll actually be widening the channel and bringing back in some of that meander and sinuosity that was there historically, in addition to removing non-native perennial trees from within the project area. So just a few more photos of the property. It is a really unique property along Arroyo Creek. This is from the upper end of the property looking back towards the ocean, and this is the creek channel here where you see this thicket of willow. It's very noticeable at the upstream property line that this is all young growth of willows. We don't have any tall stature sycamores or tall stature oak trees that we would expect to see, and that you do see just on the neighboring property upstream. So we will be incorporating some of those species back into the project to try and get some taller stature trees. In addition to a number of the non-native species we have on site, Peruvian and Brazilian peppers, as well as palms, that will be removed from within the project area. This is a photo of the lower portion of the property. This is basically the culvert under Foothill Road right here. Foothill Road is just beyond these oak trees, and it's sort of hard to tell, but the creek is flowing here left to right. And so this is that straightened, highly altered portion of the property where the creek channel really lacks any riparian vegetation currently. And just a few examples of some of the structures we'll be removing. This is an old vehicular bridge. This concrete abutment will be removed. This creek bank will be laid back in order to provide a stable slope and be revegetated with native plants. And an example of pipe and wire revetment, as well as there's concreted creek banks all throughout the creek, which will be removed as part of the project. So jumping into the project designs, the Creeks Division has been working with Cuesta Engineering to design this project. Just to orient you, north is to the left here, so we've sort of flipped our orientation counterclockwise from most of those historic photos. Foothill Road is over here. And this sheet just shows all the unnatural features that will be removed from the property as part of construction, including an existing asphalt roadway, 2 vehicular bridges, and a number of remnant structures throughout the Creek Canyon. Moving into the grading plans, the darker, bolder grading lines here show our proposed grading. And the major things to point out are that in the lower portion of the creek, we will actually be widening this channel and bringing back in some of those meanders, as I talked about, as well as sections of braided channel where we'll have a secondary creek channel, a low flow channel, and a high flow channel, as well as the fill material that we will be removing from this lower portion of the creek will be used on site to build an upland wetland feature. So in this broad, wide area on the east bank of the property, we will be building a roughly 7,000 square foot upland detention basin to provide wetland habitat, to increase habitat diversity on site for wildlife, but also to capture and treat some of the storm runoff from these upslope properties. And additionally, sections of the creek channel that are eroded and incised will be rebuilt with natural cobble to mimic the natural stream bed to prevent future channel incision and also address fish passage at the site. And this is just a cross-sectional view of a few of those sites. This is that wide, broad area in the channel. And you'll see that this flood terrace is inundated on just the 2-year storm event to provide additional habitat diversity as well as infiltration and treatment of storm flows. In our planting design, we have 4 different planting zones. All the disturbed slopes within the project area will be planted and seeded with native plants. We have our wetland species down low in the channel, our lower riparian species like willow and mule fat, transitioning up into more upland riparian species like our sycamores, and then out into our upland habitat, which is more coastal sage scrub. There's about 40 different native plants that will be planted in order to increase the species diversity on site. So moving into our timeline and next steps, we've currently secured all of our environmental permits and reviews. The project is actually currently out to bid. We decided to bid this project under 2 separate contracts, one for the civil construction portion of the project and one for the landscape portion. And those bids close next week. We're anticipating a construction start date of mid-July in the hopes that construction will be completed in about 3 months and the landscape portion of the project in 2 months, so that will be wrapped up before the end of November. And our budget at this point is based off of our engineer's projected estimates. So he's put together a detailed cost estimate for all the portions of the construction project, including the demolition of all those features, the regrading of the stream channel, rebuilding of that upland wetland area. And that total project cost is coming in at about $700,000. And the landscape portion includes all of the installation of erosion control materials on all bare slopes, mulching the areas, installing all of the native plants, seeding with native seed, as well as installing a temporary irrigation system. And that total cost is coming in at $260,000. And with some additional engineering oversight costs from both our design engineers at Cuesta and the city's Public Works Department, our total budget at this point is coming in at just over $1 million, $1,055,000. And funding for this is within the Creeks Division's capital improvement budget, and all funds for the project are coming from Measure B. So, questions?
That's great. Thank you very much for the presentation. We appreciate it, and welcome aboard to the Creeks Division. We don't have any public comment on this item, so I'm just going to open it up to the Commission for questions and or discussion comments. So does anyone have anything? Ms. Longstreet?
Just, it looks like a wonderful project, and just you're building on Arroyo Burro, the whole area. I mean, you're getting the whole watershed, and not quite. I know I'm exaggerating, but it's nice to see such an upstream project coming through, and I think this is what everyone anticipated Measure B doing, was these long-term big projects that don't come another way. So thank you very much for it, and I can't wait to see it when it's complete.
Mm-hmm. Great. Anyone?
Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Clark.
A couple months ago in April, I think, I went to a revegetation project put on by Creeks at Stevens Park. And I think everyone that participated, it was Santa Barbara families and kids and adults in the Civilian Conservation Corps and AmeriCorps. They came away feeling like stewards of this land, and they learned a lot. Will we have opportunities to participate in this project near the end?
So the bulk of the implementation of this project, no. And the property itself it doesn't lean itself very well to public access, given its location in this steep canyon. There's limited access from our main entry off the road with little to no parking, I'll say. So we do plan to have some guided access in the future, small school groups or potentially tours or bird walks. So there is the potential in the future that there could be some sort of volunteer weeding or planting event, but not on such a large scale as this project is going to be.
Anyone else? Okay, I had a couple things. I was just curious, why is this project 2 contracts? I thought that was an interesting approach.
Yeah, so the Creeks Division had previously done that with the Arroyo Estuary project with good results, given that we're including 2 years of maintenance as an alternate bid item with a landscape contract. So the landscape contractor who's installing the plants and the irrigation is then on the hook to...
That makes perfect sense now, yeah. And there's no grant funding on this project at all?
That is correct.
It's all Measure B?
Yeah, the Creeks Division applied for a $500,000 grant last year to the Department of Fish and Wildlife that unfortunately was unsuccessful.
Okay, okay, yeah. That rarely happens with Creeks Division. So.
Yeah,
Okay, and you answered my question on the irrigation. I really appreciate the upland seasonal wetland. For increasing habitat diversity. I think that's pretty exciting component of the project. And I'm just curious. It's the project. The site is a little bit over 14 acres, I guess. So, what do you have planned for the other 9 acres of this project? Is it things like you're talking about, which might involve some public access for educational opportunities at some point in time?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess I forgot to say that, but this project is limited to just 5 acres, and so there is a whole other 9 acres of upland habitat. You can see, even in this photo, that there are a number of oak trees coming in all over the place. We see these oak trees that are about 5 to 10 years old. We're assuming they're coming in since the last clearing and after the Hesazita fire. And so that's really the plan, is for this to just return to more of an oak woodland setting in those upland areas. And the goal of this project was to really focus on the creek portion of the property.
So is there a lot of non-native vegetation on the 9 acres that you're not doing, or is it mostly going to...
There are some. There's primarily, I would say, non-native annual species, which the hope would be that once oaks get established, they'll kind of shade out a lot of those species. There are a few perennial tree species that may be targeted for removal in the future, but not at this point.
Okay, well, that's great. That's good to see. Then I was curious about, the 9 acres maybe invading what you are doing in the little bit over 4 acres on the property, or 5 acres on the property. So, okay, well, great. Thank you so much for the presentation. It was excellent, and like Ms. Longstreet said, we are looking forward to seeing it when it's complete. I think you'll give us a tour. You'll let us in, right? Okay.
Definitely. I hope we'll have a tour.
Thank you very much. Okay. We're going to move on to agenda item number 4, which is Ealing's Park Foundation proposal to renovate the Las Positas tennis facility. And this is a 2-part agenda item. We're going to receive a presentation, and then if the commission feels it's in a position to act on making findings for the project, we can do so. If someone feels that needs to be postponed, we can do that also. But that's the goal here. So, and we'll do the presentation, and then we have a number of public speakers on the project. So we'll do public comment and after questions. We'll do the presentation. Any questions from commissioners, not comments, just questions, and then we'll open it up for public comment, and then it'll come back to the commission. So thank you. Ms. Zachary.
Chair Wiscombe and members of the commission, I have a few slides that I'd like to go through with you, and then I'll turn the presentation over to the Ealing's Park Foundation. Next slide. Great. So the Las Positas tennis facility was developed in 1972, and it was operated by our department until 2010. At that time, due to a variety of factors related to the economy, and the fact that we had fairly significant deferred maintenance at the facility, we entered into a lease agreement with the Ealing's Park Foundation to operate and maintain the facility, as well as undertake capital improvements. And what we're here today is to have the commission discuss, and hopefully, if you are ready to approve the project, make findings so the project can continue through the design and development review process. Your staff report outlines sort of the objectives of the lease with Ealings, essentially to continue to provide tennis programming to a wide range of tennis users, whether they're youth, adults, whether it's clinics, whether it's camps, and that kind of thing. The Commission received its annual report from Ealings last May, and you will continue to receive an annual report. The focus of today's presentation is really on the project, so we'll have more in the near future. And then the lease agreement also allows Ealings to maintain and manage the property and raise revenues through grants, concessions, and fees. Any improvements to the site require approval of the Parks and Recreation Director, as well as any city design development review processes. Since this is a full-scale renovation, it does go to the Architectural Board of Review. The Commission has the role of making findings under the PR zone, and then it moves forward in that manner. Next slide. So I'm just going to briefly give you the points, and they'll go over it in more detail. The facility, as you discovered when you went on your site visit last week, is in need of some significant renovation. It's located in an area that is challenging based on its site constraints. It's not a large site. It's been well used by the community for many years. And the need for the facility is really focused on the supporting buildings around the tennis courts. There has been a lot of reinvestment in the courts themselves. The city invested in the court lighting a number of years back, and this is really focused on all the surrounding infrastructure that makes the tennis facility a place for people to go and spend time and play tennis, not just the courts. So it includes demolishing the existing buildings, constructing a new building that encompasses all of those. There is proposal to add some meeting space, a proposal to extend the roof over the practice court, and then address the stadium seating and the parking lot and new pathways and landscaping. So as I mentioned, for today's hearing, that the Commission needs to consider the Park and Recreation Zone and make its findings. And what the objectives of the zone are to protect and preserve publicly owned park and beach lands, make sure they're compatible with land uses. Your consideration will be that the project is consistent with adjacent neighboring uses and benefits the community. Under the zone, the Las Positas Tennis Courts is a designated sports facility which allows outdoor sports and tournaments, related buildings, and parking areas. In preparing for today's presentation in your staff report, I did review the PR zone allocation and the council resolution with the Community Development Director to determine whether the proposed renovation would be consistent with the designation of the site as a sports facility, and I have that concurrence. Under the PR zone, the Community Development Director has the authority to evaluate a project and determine whether the proposed use is consistent with the existing designation. So I want the Commission to know that, because sometimes you want to know more about all the other different designations, but in this case it is consistent with sports facility. So these are the findings that you will consider, and we'll come back to this slide at the end of the presentation. But just to review very quickly, the total area of the site and setbacks of all facilities from property lines and street are sufficient in view of the physical character of the land, proposed development, neighborhood, and to avoid significant negative effects on surrounding properties. That the intensity of the use is appropriate and compatible with the character of the neighborhood, that the proposed park is compatible with the scenic character of the city, and that the proposed structures are compatible with the neighborhood in terms of size, bulk, and scale. And as I mentioned, this project will go to the Architectural Board of Review. It's been through concept review, and so it does need to go back for final design review as well as development plan approval. An environmental assessment will be completed, and then there are a series of city-related building permits and other issues that the Ealings Park Foundation will proceed with once they have their final design approval. And also they'll be able to move forward with their fundraising initiative. So with that, I think I would like to turn it over to Ealings Park Foundation.
Thank you, Ms. Zachary.
Good afternoon, Madam Commissioner, Madam Chair, and the other commissioners. My name is William Bell. I'm currently the president of the Elings Park Foundation, and it's my job today to talk about Elings in general, what the foundation does, what the park is. Just, we may all know the history, but perhaps we don't. If you go back 30, 35 years, what's now Elings Park was a landfill. It was the city dump. And so we had a number of concerned citizens, and generally the primary credit to this is given to Jerry Harwin, formed the idea of turning the landfill, and reclaiming the land, like brownfield conversion they call this, into a park. And so they took off on this, and it took a number of years for this to happen. Actually, the first phase of development of what's now Elings Park was, in fact, the tennis courts. The foundation didn't exist then, but it was the precursor of the foundation, raised $320,000 for the initial construction of those courts that we have there today. And those went back to, I believe, 1972 is my date on that. And so that's when the original buildings and the courts were built. In 1980, the foundation was created, and then since then, in various phases, the rest of the park has been built. I know you went out for a site visit down at the tennis courts, but of course the park goes all the way up from there, and then we, in around the year 2000, before and after, some of it was getting it and some of it was paying for it, we developed we obtained a large piece of property that goes on the other side of the hill down towards the Douglas Family Preserve, and we call that the South Park, and it's actually in the county. We have a kind of a funny municipal thing, since some of our parks in the city and some of it's outside the city limits. The foundation on this piece of land runs various programs. We have all kinds of different sports. We play, this is a non-exclusive list, but we have soccer, we have rugby, we have lacrosse, we have BMX riding, we have softball, we have baseball, we have RC cars up there, and then they fly hang gliders off the other side of the hill, and we also host events such as weddings. And other kind of corporate events and get-togethers. The park is financed without public money. We get some grants occasionally when we can, but we are primarily financed by two things. One is contributions from various people making charitable contributions, and the other is user fees of various types. Sometimes that's direct and sometimes it's indirect. We charge for parking up there on the weekends, and these things give us the funds that we need to keep programming, to keep the fields repaired. We have some special problems up there. With it being on top of a landfill, we get more settling on our fields, and so our fields have to be redone more often than others. But overall, it's a tremendous improvement for the city. Instead of having the landfill in the middle of the city, we have this beautiful, gorgeous green belt that we do have instead. With regard to the specifics of the project, I'll defer to Mike Nelson, who's our executive director for the programming issues, and Ray Hicks, who's our architect for the design issues, and I'll defer to them. But if people have questions about the park in general, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you very much. Mr. Nelson, welcome.
Commissioners, Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity to be here today, and I appreciate you're all visiting us out at the Las Positas tennis courts last week. As Jill suggested, the lease had, two basic goals. One was to continue public tennis at the Las Positas tennis courts, and the other was to make improvements to the existing condition. Today, I'm actually very pleased to say that we have 215 annual members who enjoy the club, the tennis courts on a regular basis. We have women's, we have men's interclub teams. We have youth teams that compete there on a regular basis now. We have been able to raise the funds privately to resurface the courts, to replace all of the fencing, and to replace windscreens and, in fact, repair and paint the lighting that the city installed there. So now we're trying to address the final piece, the big improvement, the capital improvement that when the board negotiated with the city anticipated providing. Because of our increased participation, we feel very confident that we can raise the funds to, in fact, do the project that we're proposing to achieve today. I want to say, though, that this project has been revised a number of times. It has been, as Jill suggests, to ABR on a number of occasions, and in each one of those public sessions, there were comments and there were concerns expressed. When I presented to the City Council and to you, people had things to say about what we were doing there programmatically and what we were proposing to do there. City Council even basically, I remember Council Member White saying to us, you just don't have it quite right yet. You need to keep working on it. And I am here today to say that I think we're getting better at getting it right. And based on that, based on the new participation that has occurred, our donors are excited about the prospect of raising the funds to, in fact, rebuild and renovate the Las Positas tennis courts. So I want you to know, before turning it over to Ray, that this project reflects the concerns of citizens, of our tennis committee, and of others that we have encountered along the way. A number of notable improvements, just to point that out, is we'll talk about the practice courts. At one time, our plans were proposed to abolish the practice court and replace it somewhere else. We talked about a cafe. And at each one of those points, there was some concerns expressed about that, and we tried to adjust our plans to where they are today to accommodate what was expressed to us along the way. I also, before turning it over to Ray, want to say that our landscape architect, Bob Cunningham, couldn't be here today, but he met yesterday with your urban forester and myself, and he went out to the site and realized that a narrative that I had provided you and that's in your thing basically mentioned regarding the removal of trees. It talked about 2 existing orchids in the stadium seating area being removed. There are actually 5. I've got corrections for that. I know Bob's plans, though, discussed the removal of 5, but we didn't articulate that way, and Bob and I regret that. And now we'll turn it over to Ray Hicks, who will run through the fundamental elements of the project, and if you'll let me, I will advance the slide. Can you get my slide on? I got it. Okay.
Good afternoon. I'm Ray Hicks. I'm the architect on the project, and I'm going to go through all these different slides very quickly. I'm going to try to keep it as brief as possible, but feel free to stop me if I'm going too quickly. So let's start at A101.
We will, as soon as it pops up here on the screen. This is... There we are.
Okay, A101. There it is. So just as a brief overview, the project involves, we'll start at the parking lot, a renovation of the parking lot that will be a repair or replacement of the asphalt in the existing footprint. We're going to take up the existing footpath and replace that with an accessible concrete permeable paver path. And we're going to demolish all the existing structures except for the practice court. And we're going to create a new building there and have the roof extend from the new building over the hitting practice court. And we're going to renovate the existing, we're going to replace the existing stadium seating there with a similar sort of design that will be more appropriate. Let's go to 102. That's good. So the existing courts, as mentioned, have already been renovated. There's new nets, new fencing. The lights, the posts have all been renovated, and they're looking really good. Let's go to 8103. And so I'll touch on the parking lot, and then we'll work our way up to the building. We're going to take the parking lot, which is in a pretty bad condition right now, and repair it and bring it all up to code. We're going to have new accessible parking spaces, restriping. There's going to be new gates at the entry and exit that will be similar to the other park entrance. And we're going to have new planter islands, bringing the parking lot up to code. So let's go on to 104. This is the floor plan. We're going to have a court director desk there and a new meeting space area with an office. All new restrooms with new showers there, all accessible, of course. A multi-purpose area with a sink and small fridge. And that multi-purpose area is going to have overhead garage doors so that it can be opened up and used for several different functions. And then, as mentioned before, the roof will extend over the existing practice court there. And, flip back for just a sec to 104, if you would. And the new patio is going to be all concrete pavers. And the new patio is designed in order to take advantage of the views there. We can look out onto the courts, all the courts. The previous design didn't have that. Okay, let's go into 105. And I've got the models here, but I'm not going to have much time to go into detail with materials. But that building section is that model, and that is a model of the shade structure. So if you do have questions on materials and colors, I've got the board here. 106. Those sections give a pretty good indication of how the building is set into the hillside, and that's one of the design issues we're struggling with. Is the back of the roof has to be high in order to get high enough to have it so that people can't jump onto that roof, whereas the front of the roof tends to want to be low. So that's dictating the curved roof design. And ABR also was favorable to that. And then this section, the lowest one there, shows the stepped-up stadium seating. What we're doing there is completely tearing out the stadium seating that's there. It's all rotted timber. We're replacing with something similar, new stairs going down, but it's going to be a design that incorporates planting areas and stacked stone boulders to still incorporate seating, but it'll be a much nicer design. And go on to PL1. This is the planting plan, and we did touch on the fact that we're removing those orchid trees at the front, and the planting information's there if there are any questions on it. And PL2. This is the parking lot area where we're planting, and we're adding new screening and planting screening along Las Positas. Okay, let's go on to the drainage plans. And as I mentioned, the parking lot's being redone. The water, this is the drainage plan. The water is going to sheet across the parking lot and be collected in a infiltration trench there. And that will hold the water. The plan at the moment is to do this in asphalt and have concrete pavers at the entry and the exit. And one of the questions that came up was the idea of possibly doing pavers for the entire parking lot. It's right now the plan is just to have it as asphalt with the pavers at the entry and the exit. We're also collecting water from the existing tennis courts and putting them into flow wells. So that water can be reused. For instance, if they want to hose down the courts and not waste water, that can be reclaimed water. And then the water can also be used for planting. That covers just about everything I've got. I open it up for questions.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Hicks. Does that conclude your presentation? Okay, great. Thank you. So we have a number of public speakers on this item. So let's go back to the commission first. And do you have any questions? Anyone have any questions about? Yes, Mr. Cavazos.
Just in regards to the permeable pavers, were we able to get a cost analysis on what that would be?
Yes.
Can you come back up, to the podium so everyone can hear you? Thank you, Mr.
Asphalt would be in the ballpark of about $4 a square foot. Pavers are in the ballpark of about $10 a square foot. We've got about 18,600 square feet in that parking lot. And that would assume, of course, that you'd want to do the entire parking lot in pavers. So there's a pretty significant difference there. That's the difference between the two times 18,000 is over $100,000.
And what about, do we know how much more water we could reclaim if we were to do permeable?
Well, the design already incorporates reclaiming all the water that sheets off the parking lot into the, I shouldn't say reclaim, it holds it. But the pavers, of course, wouldn't reclaim the water either.
And then the other question I had is in regards to the roof access on the back, how high is that off of the hill?
It's about 5 feet. We're going to try to keep it so that a kid couldn't jump up and grab a hold of that roof and then get it up there. Just make it very difficult. I mean, if they really wanted to, there's going to be a gap sort of where the hillside goes down and the wall goes up. So it'll be difficult for a kid to get up there. We're going to
Is there a possibility of making it higher? Because without pleading any guilt, I know of kids that would have easily got onto like a 5-foot roof.
Yeah. So let's shoot for 6. It's just a matter of maybe creating a little bit of a retaining wall before the building and then having it go down a little bit more. So it can easily be done. So let's shoot for 6 there.
Did I miss it? Did you say what the total cost for the project was?
We haven't been able to price it yet. We've got some guesses. We're shooting for over $1 million, probably less than $2 million, and it depends what's included in that and what's not. Somewhere in the ballpark of $1.3 million.
Else have questions? I just had a couple. I think you answered the one on the permeable pavers. I think, we're not a design review, but I think, we're doing so much permeable paving in our city now that's the projects have really gained a lot of traction, and it would just be nice to do that. I was kind of uncomfortable with the repair of the asphalt in the parking lot, given the shape that it's in. So I don't know what repair means, but if there's any possibility without breaking the bank that could be part of the project, I think that would be.
Chairperson Liscombe, we actually had a discussion of this. We had a board meeting today, and I'm not a construction guy at all, obviously, but some of the guys that were talking about whether it's possible to figure something out that would be in between. We all understood that it's really going to be a prohibitive increase in the cost to put in the permeable pavers, but they may be able to come up with something that is better than what we proposed without it being 2.5 times as much for the parking lot.
I'm sure Mr. Giffens can help you with that.
Giffen was one of them, yes, and we've got a fellow by the name of Lou Venegas that used to work for Granite Construction, who's just joined our board, and they were putting their heads together saying maybe we can try this, maybe we can try that. So
even if they're maybe at the downstream end of the parking lot and the water sheeting off, that might help. And then my other question, there was talk installation of a gravel infiltration ditch at the downstream end of the parking lot. I know I didn't quite see where the ditch was on the plans, but I'm wondering, is it possible to make this a planted swale or some sort of the word gravel ditch just it didn't really give me.
Go one more, Mike.
warm and fuzzy feelings.
There's
So.
a detail of that. One more.
Oh, there is? Because I missed it, if there is.
Yeah.
Oh,
that,
yeah.
infiltration chart. It's not very large, and it's just a gravel strip.
Okay, how wide is it? Does it show there? Because I can't see. And
2 feet.
Oh, okay. Okay, so there's no, okay.
Yeah.
There's- that answers my question, yeah.
The question of the pavers possibly going at the downhill side, they are, in fact, the water's designed to go down, then hit a strip at the entry, and hit a strip of pavers at the exit. So there's a strip of concrete pavers there. One more comment on the pavers. It's actually ornamental any more than that, which is possible, but the water already is sheeted to those areas and into that trench, so it's caught and processed, you might say. But we could come up with if it's
Yeah.
an aesthetic thing, it's a different.
Well, maybe as Mr. Bell said, there's something that you could work out in the middle where, maybe the parking stalls are asphalt and, because that's where cars drip oil, and then maybe the driving aisles are permeable pavers or something. So.
And then just to confirm, yeah, I think it is going to be a complete replacement of the asphalt. I'm assuming that, but it's in pretty bad shape.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so that answers our questions. I'm going to, does anyone else have anything? No? Okay. So I'm going to open it up for public comment now. We have a number of speakers, and if you would all try to keep it to 2 minutes, I'd appreciate it. And our first speaker is Susie Dahl, followed by Salvi Della Barca. Is that great? Okay.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Susie Dahl, and I'm a member of the Alings Tennis Center and play on a league team there. Many years ago, when I was about 7 years old, I learned to play tennis there for the first time, and I'm happy to still be playing there today. I just wanted to take time to share with you how happy I am to see the progress and the improvements at the courts. It's wonderful to see more and more people of all ages using the facility. The upkeep and the maintenance have made this a wonderful place to play. The courts themselves are in excellent condition, and we're all looking forward to the planned repairs and improvements to the buildings, restrooms, and walkways. So often I know people only take time to express their complaints, but today I wanted to give you the input that I and my tennis friends are all very happy with the management, the improvements, and the planned improvements taking place at the tennis center.
Great. Thank you very much for your comments. Okay. Salvi Della Barca, did I say that correctly? Okay. Welcome. Why don't you come on up?
Yeah, I'm Salvi Della Barca. I'm a tennis player. I've played over there for the 10 years that I've been in town. I'm a retired general contractor, did design, build, and industry and industrial work up north in the Central Valley. And so I would make one comment on the presentation. I think what's lacking is the pictures of the disjointed buildings and the structure and the facility that's there. It could bring some contrast to where this is going, because this is really something that is, it's had its life. I think you guys might have visited there, and so you negotiated your way without twisting an ankle, and you can see that all the oils have evaporated and the cracks have opened up and they get larger by the year. The termites have taken hold on the wood seating and at the stadium court. So all that stuff is long gone, and it's past its life, its useful life. But the tennis facility is wonderful, and it's great to witness since the spring, the rejuvenation of activity there. I've got 3 generations. I've got grandchildren and my son, and they're all tennis players. We had for the first time a league match here when even members of the opposing forces of this project or the Alings project at large were participants and happy, and almost took up memberships there. So that was good to see. So I just want to say that the project is a good solution. There's going to be tweaks of some of the fine fine-tuning some of this stuff. But I think it's a great step in the right direction, and the energy is building.
Thank you very much for your comments. Okay, our next speaker, Elizabeth Winterhalter. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm president of the Santa Barbara Tennis Patrons, which is an umbrella organization throughout Santa Barbara, and we've been around for over 40 years. But if I may, I'd like to pass my speaking opportunity up to my executive director, who has more information and background for this project and our support of it, if that's okay. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Kathy Ann Simon, Executive Director of Santa Barbara Tennis Patrons. Like Elizabeth said, we're a nonprofit that's been in existence for about 44 years. So we developed junior tennis in Santa Barbara for all this time. We were delighted when Illings Park took over the courts because it provided an opportunity for us to help with some of our programming. One of the things we do is we develop junior tennis in Santa Barbara. So we have a schools program in all the local schools, Santa Barbara City Schools, Hope School District, Carpinteria, and we provide tennis programming. We expose kids to tennis at a very young age without having to go to a court. We go in the schools during and after school, and then we're looking for that stepping stone for them to then go try and play tennis. So we provide low-cost clinics, one's at municipal courts, one's in Carpinteria, and for the last, I want to say 4 or 5 years, we've had one at Illings Park. So it's a co-sponsorship with Illings Park. The first clinic is free, and each one after that is $7. So it's a nice progression. We get them in the schools. We get them into a low-cost clinic at Illings Park or another facility, and from there, next step would be junior team tennis. We do also have junior team tennis teams out of Illings Park. And this June, I'll be helping run a junior novice tournament at Illings Park. So we have that progression of schools, low-cost clinic, junior team tennis, novice tournament. So it's a great progression. And I also am the USTA league coordinator for the adult league in Santa Barbara. So we also have USTA teams playing out Illings Park.
If you could wind up, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, so great programming. I think these improvements will make it a safer community place for our kids and adults to go to, and I hope we can have more community events with them in the future after these improvements.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Okay, our next speaker is Karen Van Hoek, to be followed by David Niles.
Commissioners, thank you for letting me speak. Karen Van Hoek. I played on the Las Positas tennis courts from 1988 until shortly after Ealings Park took it over and raised the rates substantially so that a majority of people couldn't afford to play there any longer. This proposed project by Ealings Park seems a bit beyond the scope of the Parks and Rec Commission for approval. There are serious zoning and building regulations that need addressing. This project should go to the Planning Commission. Just an example, state laws require, and I can get any of these documents to you if you're interested, but state laws require gas monitoring and building modifications of a closed structure within 1,000 feet of a landfill, and this is within 400 feet of a landfill. This expense would likely be incurred by the city, as it does on the main park, not cheap by any means, and I don't see anywhere where this has been addressed by Ealings Park. Have traffic and environmental concerns been addressed? It is already a dangerous turning onto Las Positas from the site. This small site of 6 tennis courts is now underused under Ealings management. I drove by there yesterday afternoon. This afternoon, no one was on the courts. It used to be a very vibrant public tennis facility. We actually obtained the documents from 2009 before Ealings Park took over, and there was tons of people, permits, day use. We have it. It was the most vigorous tennis facility, much more used than the Muni courts or the Persing Park courts. This small site should really be have a reduced building and not a large building like this. 1 or 2 open-air unisex bathrooms would be ideal and would be in compliance with the zoning of PR sports facility. Despite what Ms. Zachary said, our attorney sent a letter to ABR and the City Council, and under the laws, in a sports facility category, the only permitted structures are minor buildings, defined as buildings which are not used for recreation programming or meetings. Minor buildings include restrooms, storage buildings, and equipment sheds. Elings Park is already defying zoning laws, having commercial events in an A1 residential zone without conditional use permit. More zoning defiance is not a good precedent by the city, and we feel that this project should be denied for a multitude of reasons. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. Okay, and our last speaker is David Niles. Welcome, Mr. Niles.
Thank you, Madam Commissioner and commission members. I'm here to, my name is David Niles. I'm a local landscape architect, and I just wanted to address two of the zoning issues with this. Clearly in the PR Parks and Rec zone, no meeting rooms are allowed. And so that's the main concern. So if you were to approve meeting rooms directly against the zoning ordinance, this doesn't only stand up in an appeal, but it would be a problem if later on these buildings were constructed, and if local people didn't like what was going on there and they look into it, they'll easily find out that these buildings were constructed against the local zoning ordinance, which basically, as Dr. Van Hoek said, does not allow for anything but small storage sheds, bathrooms, equipment rooms, stuff like that. It's pragmatic, too, because in a sports activity, you become distracted by other things going on, especially like tennis. So if they're up there talking or doing weights or something in these buildings, it's going to distract the people. The other thing, it's a general overall A1 zone, and Elings operates now under some controversy without a conditional use permit, meaning they don't have a permit to do commercial activity in a residential zone. This would exacerbate that. So essentially, you're creating more commercial activity in a residential zone, and the general spirit of the spirit of the general plan is that commercial development is closer to the center and not out at the perimeter of the city, because the general plan wants to have less driving, less traffic, going to yoga or weightlifting at the tennis facility. So there's multiple reasons why this structure and this park was zoned Parks and Rec sports facility. This project directly violates the zoning ordinance, and I know a lot of people will ask, if the city can't follow the zoning ordinance, who else is expected to? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, that concludes public comment, and it's back to the commission for discussion and action, since it's an action item. So again, I'll just remind the commission that we can do the following. We can make the findings. Ms. Zachary, would you put the slide back up? Thank you. And or we can delay this and have a discussion later after you've had more chance to review it. Yes, Ms. Longstreet.
Well, I would start out by saying I'm very supportive of this project. I see it as not an intensity of use. It is staying with the footprint of the building that we had. In our report, it is clear that the operators understand that it is for tennis use. You know, all of us are sad when we can't maintain the facilities we have in the city. We're sad. We would love to be able to maintain everything perfectly. And we can't. And this facility, we were lucky enough to have a partner to take over. Those were some tough years for all of us to give up some facilities. But I am pleased to see that it's moving forward in the spirit that we wanted it to go forward in. I think there were some glitches in the beginning, and I was here for all of them. I was here when the room was full, and I'm glad to see it's not full anymore. I think I was glad to see the tennis courts were full when we were there. That's where the activity needs to be. I was pleased with the design. I think it's respectful of the surroundings. It blends in well. That facility, I remember touring it at least 10 years ago when it needed to be replaced, probably 15 years ago. And now it's that much farther down the line. There's many more areas for it to go through design review. I was also here when we did the P&R zoning, when we established that. It fits. And I'm going to trust our community development director that those findings can be made, because a sports facility has facilities. Elings Park operates and has operated for many years to the benefit of our community and is a nonprofit that has to support itself. They have to make endeavors. If any of you watch the budget hearings, you see the difficulty it is operating facilities, parks on a tax dollar. So they have it even more difficult than we do, and I appreciate that some of the people that I saw complaining about activities at Elings Park are now on the board. So I think things have been changing. The outreach has happened. So I am happy to support this project. With the 5 trees being removed, that was something that I didn't quite understand when we made our site visit, and I'm glad for the clarification, because it didn't make the design flow to me. And with the 5 trees coming out, I see it better. So thank you. As far as the pavers, I think that will be established in other design review that you have. The only pitch I would put in for them is long-term maintenance is cheaper. So if you have to put it up front, if you can somehow amortize that over your lifetime maintenance, it might not make it hurt so much. So thank you.
Okay. Anyone else have comments? Yes, Mr. Cavazos.
Overall, I like the project. I would like to know, Ms. Zachary, on the last 2 speakers, where we fit. Are we in violation of, what's allowed there? I mean, I don't think that's the intent, but that did raise a concern for me.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Cavazos, I reviewed this directly with the Community Development Director, and he determined that the proposed renovation is consistent with the sports facility designation because it does allow related buildings. The intent of the use of these buildings is for tennis programming and tennis-related programming. With that, and then also the fact that the Elings Park Foundation has a very specific lease agreement with the city, which calls for the primary overriding use of this area, this facility, for tennis and tennis-related activities. That determination was made that it would fit within that.
And then there's subsequent steps that they're going to have to go through. So regardless of what we decide here, it's going to be checked and balanced down the road.
Chair Wiscombe, Commissioner Cavazos, yes. The Commission's job today is to determine whether you can make findings for approval of the project. The Architectural Board of Review actually has the design review purview and will be approving the development plan for the project. So it is a conceptual plan. I think they have identified their objectives. There may be minor tweaks as they go back to ABR. But I think in the sense of where they were at ABR and where they are today, it's consistent with what ABR direction was at the time. It wouldn't change substantially.
Perfect. So, I mean, I would just like to comment, when we went there, the first thing I noticed was the courts themselves were immaculate. Whether or not you had them staged with tennis players or whatnot, I could care less because it just looked great. But then when you started to look at the surrounding area, you definitely felt like it was out of place. It was like the buildings. I didn't even want to walk in there. One of the pergolas. It was pretty hairy. So I think the design looks great. I do want to stress again the permeable pavers. I mean, it's $6 more a square foot. I get it. That's a pain. But I keep going back to we're in like a stage 50 drought or whatever it is now. And I just think if way back when these types of projects were undertaken, had we had the foresight to say, hey, we live in a desert, let's try and figure out how to manage that water. Anything you can do along those lines, I think, would go a long way. I just keep thinking of it as the right thing to do. It's not the cheaper thing, but it is the right thing to do, I think, in our area. And again, with that stage 50 drought designation that we're under, maybe 10 years from now, we don't reach that stage again. So that's all.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Heaton?
I thank you for the presentation and the site visit. It really did put it in perspective. As it was mentioned earlier, pictures would have, but having been there, I really do get it. And these improvements are an exciting change. I think they really do fit the character of the area, the spirit of the previous facility, the footprint. And I hope that you can, realize this concept too, because you still have a fundraising goal to meet ahead. So I hope they can be carried through. On the water issue, that to me was intriguing, that you are proposing to recycle or reuse the water, catch and reuse the water off of the courts. I hope you can accomplish that. I'm interested to see that. I think that's the kind of thought that we need in new projects, and so if that can go toward landscaping, that's great. So I'd like to see incorporate that. And I feel that these the findings that we need to make are easily made. It's not even it's not a stretch, or it seems to me to just be exactly the kind of thing we would want to see.
Thank you. Ms. Clark?
I am in accordance with our Parks Director and the Development Director that this project lies within the scope of a sports facility. I really enjoyed the presentation and the site visit, and I also made a couple of my own site visits this week. And I found the courts full every single time I went. So actually talked to a couple of tennis players, and they said they're thrilled with the Elings management. They're happy with the programming, and I didn't hear any complaints about the management or the proposed project. So.
Okay, thank you. I, too, support the project. I commend the foundation for the improvements that you've made to date, and the changes that you've made in your fee structure, and the phenomenal increase in membership you have there. I think that's really gone a long way. And the proposal seems reasonable, and from what I've read and heard, it certainly seems in accordance with the terms of the lease agreement for a sports facility in a PR zone. I think it's a sensitive design that fits very well on the site. And I appreciate the collection of the water and reuse of that. I think that's important. And I also appreciate the shade trees that are in the parking lot and elsewhere. And obviously the permeable pavers. And I just hope that you guys will be so proud. Yeah, I know you will. It'll be just a great parking lot. So, and I have a couple other recognizing that the foundation needs to generate sufficient revenues from the facility while meeting the terms of its lease agreement. That outlines tennis activities as the primary use. There is a reference to other activities and alternative uses on the practice court. So I hope that you will supplement, complement, and reinforce the focus on the sport of tennis in that practice court. So, I think that's it. The only other thing which really I just have to say, because I'm a landscape architect, is please protect the existing trees on the site when you get to the construction phase, because we've had problems. There's some pretty nice trees on the site, an oak tree on the bank and some other ones. So I hope that that's the case. And I think, based on what I've heard from my fellow commissioners here, I think that we all agree that we can support the findings here. So I would certainly entertain a motion to that effect.
I will ask, do we need to read the findings in? Well, I would
read them off there because they're just a little bit different, maybe.
Yeah, they are different than what we have.
Yes.
Okay. We can make I move that we can make the findings as a commission for the Elings Park tennis renovation, that the total area of the site and the setbacks of all facilities from the property lines and street are sufficient in view of the physical character of the land, proposed development and neighborhood to avoid significant negative effects on surrounding properties. The intensity of the park use is appropriate and compatible with the character of the neighborhood. The proposed park is compatible with the scenic character of the city. The proposed structures are compatible with the neighborhood in terms of size, bulk, and scale or location.
So that's your motion?
That's my motion, and we make the findings.
Okay. Do I have a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming. We appreciate all the comments. And seeing no further business, this meeting is adjourned. Oh, Ms. Zachary. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't think I did, but I can do that now. I do have to make one further statement, and that the findings made here today by the Parks and Rec Commission are appealable to City Council within 10 days of our action. Thank you. Now we are officially adjourned.